Okay, welcome back to Economics 203. Again, I'm George Pinnell, and we're going through part 2 of the introduction, where I'm going to discuss more about what economics is, and more specifically what microeconomics is. And I know I touched briefly about that on the syllabus, in particular in relation to those two podcasts that, or first the course, the description, and then in particular to the relation to those two podcasts. That I think would give good background on the economy as a whole. Now, the caveat being the first podcast, Planet Money, sometimes will go into macro territory, actually more often than it does micro territory. But it does cover both. And then the Snacks Daily will cover business news, which can very well be micro economics material, but also they do for more of a lens for an audience of investors. So it can also go into, finance. And as you'll see in the later slides, they're related, but they're not, full overlap. And I think that there is a lot of misconception on like what economics is. Okay. What is economics? I kind of gave the brief description again in the syllabus. The least formal way of describing it is decision-making under scarcity. And I think the terminology I used when I was talking about the syllabus is, given some sort of budget constraint, how do you make the most of it? In grad school and academic economics, you talk really about what are called utility maximization functions. So utility is just your overall happiness or your objective. So how do I maximize my objective given a set of resource constraints? Economics can be, excuse me one second. Economics can be applied to, not just businesses, not just governments, not just individuals. So you have a budget of, let's say, 1,800 calories and 190 grams, which need to be protein. So that would be like, let's say, 700 calories. So that gives you 1,100 calories left over to choose between some form of fat and carbohydrates. And let's say you have some kind of, weighting between how happy 40% of that going to carbohydrates and 60% of that going to fat is, or vice versa. You're going to try to optimize the, fat to carbohydrate ratio in order to make you happiest. So you have a budget, you have some sort of decision you have to make, and you want to make the decision that makes you most happy. So that was like a fitness example. Another example could be a business, right? So let's say I make, aluminum cans. I can divide up production costs with, let's say I have $500 of, revenue to spend on cost, right? Or $500 revenue total. I can use 400 of that to pay my workers, 100 for resources. I can use 300 to pay my workers, 100 on resources, 250, or I could, pocket some and make a profit. So the budget constraint is you're not gonna cost above your revenue, and then you're trying to maximize profit and worker happiness relative to that budget. Now I'm thirsty. Alternatively, you can have something, going back to like a real life example, you can have something like sleep and like time management. So given that you need 8 hours of sleep and 8 hours of work, how do you spend the other 8 hours of your day? You could, go out to eat. You could go out with friends. You could, or maybe not in the COVID times, but in general, you could watch SpongeBob or, lift weights or do whatever, right? And you want to pick the objective, or you want to pick the decision that will make you most happy, right? Utility maximizing, we call it in economics, is the fancy term for making you happiest. So you might spend 2 hours lifting, 2 hours going on a date, 2 hours watching SpongeBob, and 2 hours eating, right? That would be a fantastic day. Or you could spend 4 hours lifting, 4 hours watching SpongeBob. Probably won't make you as happy, you know? But that's, interpersonal, and that's why, happiness is subjective. But at any rate, the least formal definition, I think the definition that I use in my daily life is how to make a decision when you have some resource constraint, some scarcity, which is another way of saying a resource constraint. Okay. Then there's a kind of a more formal definition. It includes what to produce. So for the aluminum can factory, you're going to be producing aluminum cans. But you could also have produced, machinery using aluminum, or straight aluminum for, wholesale selling if you want to be somewhere in the supply chain. How to produce it, right? So that would be what I was talking about with, you could produce it using $300 to your workers and $200 to, raw inputs. You can do 200 to workers, 100 to raw inputs, 400 to workers, 100 to raw inputs, and then have some profit or have no profit depending on, the kind of industry. Okay, so that's how to produce. Thirdly, who gets the product? So if you're producing aluminum cans and you're setting a price of $50, probably not a whole lot of people are getting the product, right? Not a lot of people can afford to drink 12 cans of soda at $50 a pop. That's $600, right? But if you charge your aluminum cans at $1, it's probably doable for most people to get the product, right? And that kind of depends on the industry and, how you can set the prices, kind of factors outside of your control sometimes. For, let's say in the government level, who gets the product? If the product of the government is, roads and social services and national defense and that kind of thing. So if you're increasing the taxes, you're kind of taking some product, some government benefit away from someone and giving it to another person, or giving it back to the same person in a different form. If you have expansive social services, a lot of people are getting the product. You have restrictive social services, probably only a few people are getting it. Or if you have no social services, nobody's getting the product of government, right? If you're in complete anarchy. So that's kind of, all this kind of formulates to a more formal definition of what economics is. Economics is a social science that studies the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. Production, what to produce. Distribution, distribution would be more who gets the product, and consumption is who gets the product. Production would be also under the how. Okay. And then I kind of threw this term here. What's a social science? Hold off. It's in the next slide.